Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We record on Monday, December 5th, as we recap a pair of huge wins for both the men's and women's basketball teams. On episode 275 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, we'll discuss how the Hokies were able to top the Tar Heels in Blacksburg and how Kenny Brooks' team got it done on the road to remain undefeated. We'll also conduct our final installation of ACC Power Rankings and update you on all things transfer portal. All of that and more coming up on episode 275 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, which starts right now. We welcome you in, whether you are listening or watching on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe while you're there, and also turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any future podcasts. I want to let you know that this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference in your overall experience. First Bank and Trust Company is the bank that puts you first. Visit www.firstbank.com to learn more. Let's introduce the crew for today. We'll have a bunch of switcheroos during the set, so lots of people to get to, but Will Stewart, founder and general manager, across the way. To my right, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. David Cunningham in the fourth chair for now will join us on set later. Carter Hill will also join us on set later. Nick Brown producing behind the scenes, and I'm your host for today, Katie Adams. A basketball-heavy podcast on deck today. But you know, I got to sprinkle in a little football. The weekend started out great with some football games Friday, Saturday, and then a basketball-heavy day yesterday, of course. Men knocking off the 18th ranked Tar Heels and women remaining undefeated. But in my household growing up, bowl game selection day was one of the most fun days of the year. I still love bowl games. I know we just talked about how they weren't as much of a thing this year, but it was different, not really having to pay any attention to it, I feel like, this year. Just knowing you weren't going to be selected. Kind of disappointing.
That is kind of odd.
Normally you're sitting there. I'll normally have something written up based on who I think the bowl opponent's going to be, because generally but you just didn't have to worry about that this year, sadly.
No, they did a bowl show on ACC Network last night, and I was like, well, don't need to watch that.
Yeah. Normally it would be like, okay, we go to the Carolina Tech game, and then I would have gotten home and immediately gotten to work on posting the bowl game article, because that's about the time it would have been announced.
I think the most amusing bowl is the Shane Beamer ruined our season bowl.
Yes.
Between Tennessee and Clemson.
And that's the Orange Bowl, right?
Yep.
Wow.
Is it Gator?
The South Carolina Notre Dame game is
it's South Carolina.
That's the Gator Bowl. So the Orange Bowl is Tennessee Clemson.
Yes. Shane Beamer ruined our season, Tennessee and Clemson.
The most orange bowl ever. I love it.
Wear orange.
2024 is going to be a great year with the expanded playoff taking place. I think this year makes a great case for it to be a positive change in college football. You think about all the teams that didn't get in, including Tennessee, Clemson, Alabama, et cetera. With all that taking place in 2024, they'll still have a chance to win the national title. So I think that's going to be something good to look forward to in the future.
Well, technically they'll have a chance.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, you never know this year.
Yeah.
Well, Georgia's so far ahead of everybody. Yeah. But, I don't know. I think Michigan, their resume says they're clearly the second best team in the country. But, how will they do in the playoffs without their running back? They beat Ohio State without him.
Yeah, they did fine without him.
So they did fine without him in that game, but we'll see in the playoffs. You're starting to wonder, whether conferences are once the playoffs expand, what's the point of having some of these conference title games?
I think conferences really need to look at that. And this is kind of off the wall. It went through my mind. I haven't thought it through, but I wonder if they should do the playoff selection ignoring the conference championship games.
I don't think you can ignore them.
They kind of do that with the NCAA tournament. They seed that whole thing and they alter it slightly.
Yeah, but at that point, you're talking teams have played 35 games.
Solid point.
I think, obviously, if you're, it killed the Pac-12 with USC getting knocked out on Friday night. It almost killed TCU.
Well, TCU went up third, right?
They did wind up third, but I'm actually surprised, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised, too. They were very nice to TCU.
They were, because normally it seems like in the past, if you lose late, that counts against you more than losing in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
Right? But so
I'm
at least,
looking at you, Alabama.
Right. So at least that's not the case.
Yeah.
I still think TCU deserved to be 3. I mean, going undefeated through 12 games, through the first I guess, 4 quarters and then you lose in overtime. I think they would have gotten killed. It would have been different. You can make a case for them being 4.
The more games you play, the more likely you are to lose.
That's correct, sir. That's why we don't get hung up on individual basketball losses, because there are 35 to 40 games in a year.
The playoff will be fun. I personally think Georgia and Michigan are more of a 1A, 1B versus Michigan not being near Georgia, but it'll be exciting to watch. Another thing to point out, the transfer portal officially opened up today. You obviously see announcements from players stating their intentions to enter, but it did not open up until today. There'll be a mass exodus from players across the country entering the portal. It'll probably be the craziest year to date regarding that. Of course, we'll keep an eye out for the Tech players who intend to enter the portal. David, if you see any announcements about that live, feel free to chime in about additional players entering.
So let me jump in here, Katie, and talk about how we're going to cover that. First of all, from a podcast and YouTube standpoint, we'll talk about it some during this podcast, but we've also told Gio and the other students who are working on TSL today to focus. They do their show in the afternoon, and again, the idea is TSL today is supposed to be up by 5 o'clock for your drive home. TSL today. So Gio and whoever's on with him today are going to focus on the transfer portal. So Chris, tell them what we're going to do on the website.
I'm going to create a page and link it to the top of our boards. It's going to be a list of all Virginia Tech scholarship players, position by position. And as Tech adds someone from the portal, I will add them into their position. And as Tech loses guys from the portal, I will take them off the list.
Yeah.
So like Caleb Smith entered the portal today, so I will take him off that list, of course, and I'll keep an updated scholarship count on there too, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah.
So those will be linked on our recruiting board and subscriber board for our subscribers.
We're having an amusing conversation. We're thinking about renaming the recruiting board to something like the player personnel board. You know,
Yep.
I mean, you could technically
Crazy.
say they're recruiting kids out of the portal,
Yeah.
you know, but it just sounds more fancy and more modern to call it the player personnel board.
College football is definitely evolving. So for a more in-depth review of the transfer portal, make sure you check out TSL today, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But since the last podcast, I want to say the additional names are notably Armani Chapman and Caleb Smith from this morning, as well as Lakeem Rudolph, Matthias Carroll, and Desmond Mahmoudi. I'd like to know who is playing wide receiver for us next year. That's my big question.
It's going to be they've offered a ton of portal guys.
The ODU kid, right?
Have they offered him?
Ali Jennings.
They should offer him.
They offered him.
Okay, good.
A name to watch.
I think mostly, though, Tech's most likely to have success in the transfer portal with FCS guys this year, and pains me to say this, but like Caleb Smith, I'm sure is leaving because he wants to play in a better offense, right? It doesn't have anything to do with much of anything else, but that offense this year was historically bad. So if you're Ali Jennings, you had a big career at ODU. Ali Jennings is going to have an opportunity to get signed by a school with a better offense than Virginia Tech, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're going to see Tech a lot of great FBS interest if you're an offensive player to play in the Virginia Tech offense. I think Tech's best chance is to get guys who want to try to prove themselves at a higher level, like FCS guys. That's what I think right now. It doesn't mean we're not going to sign anybody from the FBS level, but most of those guys, especially the ones that have 1 year left, they don't want to spend their final year on a 1 year experiment at playing offense for Virginia Tech, which I think is why Caleb Smith is leaving. He's got 1 year left and he wants to make the most of it.
Yeah, they want to do two things. They want to play for a winning program and or pad their numbers. So it gets back to a question we answered in the last podcast. How do you get, with the offense that you put on the field this year, how do you get players to come? And my answer was, it's a sales job. So how good of a salesman are you? So the other thing I wanted to talk about really briefly is, of course, NIL is important in this. And we talked about the Hokie way on the last podcast. And I want to reiterate, if you haven't seen it or heard it, go to YouTube. We extracted that clip out into, I think it's a 9-minute video clip talking about the Hokie way and them and what they do. And I believe we titled the video, we gave it a clickbait title. We called it like Hokie fans do this to help Virginia Tech's NIL efforts. So after thinking about it over the weekend, I want to encourage people again to donate to thehokieway.org. It's a tax-deductible donation, and they're looking to raise $200,000 from donors this month, which will be matched. Up to $200,000 will be matched. So we've decided to take a little bit of the lead in that and donate $2,000. So that will be matched. So Tech Sideline's contribution will be $4,000, which is 1% of what they're looking for this month. So I encourage people to look at that and join along with us and match us.
Very exciting. Well, now to get into the main event of the podcast, Virginia Tech knocks off number 18 North Carolina yesterday in Castle Coliseum 80-72. Yes, Hokies advanced to 8-1. I got a chuckle out of someone on the board saying, what a normal year that Virginia Tech football gets dismantled by UNC and then our basketball team has their way with their basketball team.
Yeah, it got kind of dicey there at the end, but Virginia Tech was in control of that. Yeah, I think UNC was out 5-0, and then Tech just stomped them until the final 4 minutes of the game.
I know everybody else was worried, but I just kind of sat there and watched the whole thing thinking, they're going to run out of gas.
The only point I got worried was when they pressed us and they got the steal under the basket.
Mutz, I think, turned it over, and
we fouled him, and he threw it up. It was the craziest bank. It was like the perfect amount of twist on the ball, and that cut it to 3.
That made it 67-64, and he went to the line.
But he missed the free throw.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the point where I was worried. I wasn't worried at any other point.
And I think Mutz was the one who scored when Tech went back down to the other end, so he made up for the errant pass.
I would not have guessed that North Carolina would lose 4 basketball games in a row, and then I heard on the radio going to the game from the Tech pregame show that Baycott may not play. He was going to be a game-time decision with that shoulder. And sure enough, how many offensive rebounds do they have? I mean, like 3, 4.
And
3 of those were really late.
MJ Collins had
2 on one back-to-back
MJ Collins had 5 offensive rebounds, which was more than
Carolina's entire
team.
So Tech's guard, so
Tech's freshman guard.
Tech's freshman guard had more offensive rebounds than UNC's entire team. That's what
I think Carolina's first offensive rebound came in like the 15-minute mark in the second half.
Right. See and that's how effective Carolina is on the boards without Baycott. So they didn't have him the entire game, and then Love missed most of the first half with foul trouble.
Yeah.
And they hadn't been playing well with those guys. Like, they started out 5-0, and now they've lost 4 in a row, but they didn't play well in those 5 games. I mean, you thought Virginia Tech's defense didn't play well against College of Charleston. Well, College of Charleston dropped 86 on UNC in the Dean Dome. Mm-hmm. They are not a very good basketball team.
Yeah.
I think they got really hot at the right time last year, but basically they're the same team they were last year without Manic. And now you take away Baycott, and then you get Love in foul trouble, and Love's inconsistent as it is anyway. I mean, they're just at their peak. They're really, really good, but they don't have enough pieces to that puzzle. Like when Love went out in the first half yesterday, I just looked at their guys, and I'm like, they didn't have any skill on the court at all. So believe it or not, that's not a quad 1 win for Virginia Tech. The net rankings came out this morning. UNC's 39th. You have to be top 30 for it to count as a quad 1 win. So Carolina will have an opportunity to finish in the top 30, but right now they are not. That's a very mediocre basketball team. So Tech is in a better position from a record standpoint after 9 games than they were last year. They're 8-1 right now. I believe they were 6-3 or so after 9 games, 5-3 after 8 games. But again, no quad 1 wins. They lost to College of Charleston, who's 49th. They beat Penn State, who's 51st.
Right.
So Penn State, if they move up 1 spot, that becomes a quad 1 win.
Because that was a neutral site.
Right. So they're a little better shape because Penn State's close.
Yeah.
And we'll see exactly how Penn State ends up. Their overtime loss to Clemson. Was it double overtime or regular overtime?
Double overtime.
Yeah, double. So watching that game yesterday, I still saw, it's Carolina's still got talent, and you saw that in the second half when Love and Davis started making some of that mid-range stuff and things got dicey. So several thoughts. Number one, they do not play well together as a team, and that is evidenced by just looking at the stats. First of all, let's get back to the rebounds. With Baycott being out, not only did Tech have 10 offensive rebounds to 4 for North Carolina, but Tech out-rebounded North Carolina 39-25.
Margin of 14.
And that leads to a shot differential of 61 for Tech and 51 for North Carolina. And the other thing that really tells you that Carolina doesn't play well together as a team is they only had 6 assists on 24 made baskets, whereas Tech had 16 assists on 31 made baskets. So basically half of them. And Carolina's assist to turnover ratio was 6-10. For Virginia Tech, it was 16-10. And that's what I see when I watch Virginia Tech play basketball. I thought they moved the ball really well early in the season. I was like, man, this is an offensive juggernaut. A few games later, they got caught in a lot of one-on-one type stuff. That's not Virginia Tech basketball. Yesterday, I thought the ball movement was a lot better, and it's such a hard offense to defend. Virginia Tech is so, and then this is an ongoing process. What are they, 8-1? Haven't even played 10 games yet.
Yeah,
and I just think they're going to get better and better. So I think it's real encouraging.
Yeah, I'm encouraged. I hope Carolina can play better because that can be a quad 1 win.
And that's
if they don't, then it's not going to be a quad 1 win, so it's not going to matter. I think Carolina, they were preseason number 1, but you remember when Tech beat that number 1 UNC in Castle that time, and Jamon and Zabian's
94-88.
Now that Carolina team had Hansbrough, who was a first-round pick. They had Ty Lawson, who was a first-round pick. Wayne Ellington, who was a first-round pick. This Carolina team is nowhere near as talented as that. Like this Carolina team couldn't hold. I mean, they don't hold up well at all against past Carolina teams. Which sounds weird to say considering they played for the national title last year, but I think they got hot at the right time. Remember, they didn't.
I also think Brady Manick played a huge role.
Well, he did, but it's Carolina. Why can't you replace Brady Manick? Yeah. I mean,
the fact that on paper Carolina brings in Nance
from Northwestern.
Yeah, and I don't with Baycott.
That's a really good front court. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great front court.
Yeah.
That's probably a better front court than they had last year. But just the way they're playing, I mean, I think RJ Davis and Caleb Love don't look anywhere close to the way they looked last year.
Love has always been inconsistent.
When they were so dangerous. And Leaky Black is the same player.
Well, sure, he's no skill on offense at all, but he can defend a bunch of different positions.
But that's my point. Right. And then you lose Armando Baycott and you know, Nance looked so rattled last night. Like the dunk MJ Collins had in transition. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting next to Sam Alves, who's writing for 3304, and he taps me and goes, "Man, Nance is jogging down the floor and was like he was like talking to Teddy V or something. He was annoyed at the refs. He was in his own head, and he tried that silly behind the back pass, on a dribble handoff, and MJ Collins, a freshman, picked it up and tomahawk jammed it down at the other end."
Did you catch my comment on the message boards about that dunk by Collins? It was so Collins dunks over Leaky Black and just starts woofing at him as he backs. And Black kind of got this little grin on his face, like, all right, you got me on that one.
Yeah, I know. I saw that. I saw him do that live when we were watching it.
So wait a minute before you go on. Let me jump in here and give you this stat. So Carolina in the ACC tournament last year was 3 of 26 from outside. Last night they were 3 of 17. That's pretty simple math. That's 6 of 43 from outside in their last 2 games against Virginia Tech. And those are, so Tech's won 2 in a row against UNC, first time since the 06-07 season.
Reggie Love was 3 of 17 against Tech last year, right, from the field in the ACC tournament.
Yes, that rings a bell.
And then he goes to the NCAA tournament. He's just going off on everybody. So Carolina.
You say Reggie Love?
Caleb Love. Oh,
who's Reggie Love?
I don't know. It's got to be somebody.
I don't know.
Nick's going to Google it.
Yeah. There's definitely a player somewhere named Reggie.
Might be
Love.
one of our subscribers or something like that.
Caleb Love. I already forgot what I was going to say.
Well, you're talking about how well he played in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I was going into something else with it.
Yeah, but he's a guy that I was actually worried about him last night. If he got going from the outside, that was going to be a problem.
And it was big when he was in foul trouble the entire first half.
I think what really helped North Carolina last year was because Dawson Garcia was who Tech played him. He's at Minnesota now. Tech played him on Monday when they beat Minnesota in the Big Ten or ACC Big Ten Challenge, and Garcia, he's a Minnesota native. He played at North Carolina last year, and he was the guy in the front court with Armando Baycott for the first half of the year, and then he had some family issues, and he essentially quit the team and left.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
And then they threw Manick in. And the reason why I think North Carolina was so good was because they had a shooter, a guy that they literally could sit in the corner and he could play good defense, he could rebound, but he could shoot threes.
Right.
And anytime they needed a shot, he hit them. Caleb Love is not consistent. Leaky Black is not consistent.
You can help
RJ Davis is not consistent. They turn the ball over way too much, and they don't have, like, what did you say? They had like 6 assists?
6 assists, yeah.
Tech had 16 assists on 31 made baskets last night.
Yeah. So basically what we're saying here is Carolina's not very good.
Yeah. They've got talent, but have not been able to
have quite enough pieces to the puzzle.
No, and when you don't have Armando Bacot, then you're not rebounding the ball.
Yeah, exactly.
So if Tech had lost that game, it would have been bad.
Yes, sure would have. So they're gonna struggle for as long as he's out. But even when they had him, they weren't playing well this year. So they got a long way to go.
You mentioned it earlier, this game dominated by Justin Mutz. He really got whatever he wanted offensively, 27 points, 10 rebounds. How about
21 in the second half.
Yeah. How about the day from him?
He just kept going to the basket, and he's such a matchup problem. Like a lot of big men really struggle guarding him off the dribble.
Teams refuse to double him in the post.
Right. Well, he's
a great passer.
Great passer.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just he's always been called a glue guy, and I think it was Rothstein this weekend is finally like, okay, look at his numbers. He's more than a glue guy. Yeah, I mean, he's just a really good player. Yeah. And I think what's the best game of his career? It was either yesterday or his triple-double game, depending on how you look at
Syracuse.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask who did he get the triple double against?
They tried to guard him with Nance for a while, and at times, and Nance couldn't do it. Tyler Nickel, the freshman, tried to guard him for a while, and he couldn't do it. There's just anybody that can guard him. He's just such a matchup problem.
So who can guard him? It'd be interesting to see how he does against UVA. Now I'm not saying they can guard him one-on-one, but they're a good team.
They're just such a good team defensive.
Yeah, I mean, you think like Caden Shedrick and like UVA did a good job on Keve and Luma. Now Keve, if you remember, I guess it was the COVID game, Tech won in Castle where there was nobody there. But Keve had a couple like really big shots where I think what Keve did and Mutz can do it, but Keve would basically isolate himself on the baseline a little ways away from the basket, back his guy down, and kind of do a little bit of a Dirk Nowitzki fadeaway, and that worked. But if you go back to the JPJ matchup at UVA last year, they did such a good job of kind of isolating Aluma and Mutz against each other. But I mean, maybe Duke's got big freshmen, but besides that, I mean, we saw Mutz, dominate in the ACC tournament against really good talent last year. I mean, Mutz is just a very good player, and I think, if it's funny, he was annoyed at himself after the game because he had 5 turnovers. And
did he really? I didn't think he had that many.
2 or 3 of them were late.
One of those was an offensive foul.
Right.
One of those was and one of them was very painful late. It put the game in doubt. The one we were talking about.
2 of them were like that late. He threw away one under Tech's basket, and also one on that inbounds pass. Yeah. So
and he's shooting the 3 ball at a pretty good clip too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're gonna do our final ACC football power rankings. I think we need
to transition to basketball power. I know who I have last.
Louisville, I guess, right?
Well, they haven't won a game.
Yeah,
and Florida State.
Florida State's been playing better.
Florida State's won 1 game.
Yeah, and they've been playing.
And then they took UVA down to the wire.
You got at the top UVA,
Florida State.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's not get into it. Anyway, it's coming.
A tangent. I mean, what do you think of Sean Padula's performance? They put Leaky Black on him, one of the best defenders in college basketball.
We were talking about that earlier in the game.
I was like, man, all right. So that was I thought a pretty good decision by UNC because Padula, he's got the best post moves for any point guard you'll ever see. He's got better post moves than most Tech centers have had throughout the years. So they were determined to take that away, and they did. And you take that away, and that's why Leaky Black is such a valuable player for them.
Very beginning.
Now, he hurts them on the offensive end because he's easy to guard. You can help off of him and things like that, but he's a matchup problem on the other end of the court. So Virginia Tech, I actually think that I'll say this, it helped Virginia Tech. Padula was so good at playing one-on-one basketball that I think Virginia Tech has been playing too much one-on-one basketball. And that's why, as Mike Young puts it, they're an 8-cylinder team and they've only been running on 4 cylinders.
Playing a July pickup game.
I thought they were on 6 cylinders this weekend. I thought they could have played better, but I thought they basically took away his one-on-one game and they forced Virginia Tech to play team basketball, which is what Virginia Tech excels at. So I thought, technically speaking, it was a right decision for them, but at the same time, I think it really made us go out there and play better team basketball than we had been playing. And Tech did. They won the game. They played very well offensively.
So, going in, Padula was Tech's leading scorer, right? 17 a game?
Yeah.
So they had a guy that could guard Padula. They didn't have a guy who could guard Mutz. That was their problem. Yeah. So Padula wound up going 5 of 14 overall, 1 of 5 from 3. And tell me about the one he made, Chris.
Oh, my gosh. I was at the end. It was about a minute left. And I forgot, was Tech up by 4 or 5? 4.
I think it was, Nick says it was 4.
He let it go. No, he hesitated. I went back and watched the replay last night. He was so wide open, and he was deep. It was like NBA range.
20 seconds left on the shot clock
on the shot clock game. And he gets the ball in his hands, and they're nowhere close to him. And he's like,
"It's a 5-point game. Probably shouldn't shoot. Seconds.
I probably shouldn't shoot this. I know I shouldn't shoot this. I should shoot." And then he finally shot it, and I'm like, "Oh no, what are you doing?"
Chris and I were watching it. Chris goes, "No," and then it goes in.
Yeah. And okay, yeah. I don't think it was the best decision in the world. It was shades of A.D. Vasayo at Wake Forest in 2007-2008 season when Virginia Tech held a lead late. He took a 3-pointer in a transition with like a minute left and missed it.
And that's why he's Virginia Tech's all-time 3-point leader.
That's right. That's right. And that's also why we lost that basketball game.
Oh. Yeah. That was, I remember that. It was during a Christmas break. I was watching it.
I was at the game.
Frustrating.
Yeah. So it was one of those things like, okay, if you make it, you take it, you better make it.
Yeah.
And so to Padula's credit, he made it.
Virginia Tech had control of the majority of this game, leading by as much as 18. The energy did start to shift towards the end. UNC cut the lead down to 3 with 3 minutes to go. A common theme from the Charleston Classic was the inability to kind of put teams away and finish a game. So what were your thoughts in that moment?
I think going back to last year, especially it was this time last year when Virginia Tech was playing the Daytons and Xaviers and Memphises of the world. And those teams really put a lot of ball pressure. And in some cases would press Tech in the backcourt, and Tech couldn't handle it. And again, we saw a situation yesterday where Tech at times did not do a very good job of handling it. That's just not who Tech is. But at the same time, sometimes you sit there and wonder, why don't teams just press Tech the whole time? Because you can't play.
They've got one pure ball handler.
Right. So I think the reason for that is you can't play at that pace for 40 minutes.
Right.
You can't unless you have a ton of depth, which obviously Carolina does not have.
But you know who did it last year? Dayton.
Yes.
Who Virginia Tech sees on Wednesday.
Yes.
And that's the reason why Tech lost the game last year, was because Tech got into that exact same situation. And now, granted, Sean Padula, I don't think really had Mike Young's trust yet. It's like December 12th. And they're on the road in Dayton.
True road game.
And and you've got a veteran point guard in Storm Murphy. And Tech could not handle the press. And yes, Mutz had 1 or 2 silly turnovers that I'm sure he would love to have back trying to break the press. But overall, and Mike Young said it too, Tech did a fine job handling that. I mean, there were 1 or 2 moments where you would have been like, oh, God, that's not good.
That was close.
But Tech didn't necessarily let it get away from them, and they were hounding all the guards. But you put the ball in Justin Mutt's hands, and Mutz just casually walked the ball up the floor. Mm-hmm. So, the fact that teams, I think again, Mike Young has shown that if you kind of press his teams, they get a little out of sorts at least once. But I think Padula did a fine job handling it. I think it was more Mutz had that one, bad pass that led immediately to that basket you talked about.
So let's go over some statistics that are related to that. As we've talked about, both teams had 10 turnovers. Points off turnovers, that's one of the stats that UNC actually won. They had 14 points off turnovers.
Yeah.
Tech had 10. fast break points, UNC had 12 and Tech had 10. So that's probably part of what was manifesting itself late in the game was more of those opportunities.
Yeah. 10 points for Tech on the fast break is a lot for Tech.
That is a lot.
That's a lot for Tech.
And a dunk on the fast break.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, they forced turnover. It was a lot of them came early.
Yeah.
I mean, and North Carolina's came late.
Exactly.
Basili had that one.
That was the finish that Basili had. I was like, oh my God, he's going to charge. He just floated it up.
I tweeted at the time, and it's such a minuscule play in the grand scheme of the game to like include in my story or something like that. But that was such a smart play because North Carolina is setting up to take the charge, and Basili basically took it all the way down, didn't drive at 100 miles an hour, and just kind of stopped and hit a little floater. And he's 6'9". It's easy for him to kind of just lay it up, basically float it into the hoop. But that could have easily been a swing going the other way, and it ends up being 2 points for Tech.
Yeah, and that was a solid game from Basili. He was 4 of 9 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3, and I thought the one he made was clutch. 3 of 4 from the line, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and only 1 turnover. So solid game.
And I thought Tech's switches and everything, they seem to be more on point defensively yesterday.
I think Tech is starting to get better defensively.
Now, granted, UNC does not pose much of a threat offensively without Baycott, and then with Love on the bench for most of a half. But still.
So was this our best team performance thus far? And if so, what else do you feel like they still need to work on going into Dayton and Oklahoma State?
Well, first of all, we got to talk up MJ Collins. We can't let the individual player discussion.
Yes, absolutely. 8 points, 8 rebounds, 5 offensively. You mentioned the dunk. A lot of development from the true freshman, which is good to see.
Yeah, you can see the confidence. So what were his numbers for the game? 2 of 7 from the field, and 1 of 4 from outside. So the shooting numbers weren't great, but he was 3 of 4 from the line, including a couple late that were important.
Yeah,
and 8 rebounds. 0 turnovers.
By the way,
I think he played about 22 minutes.
Reggie Love played basketball for Duke. Reggie Love played basketball for Duke from 2000 to 2005.
So he's not
a bodyguard for Obama.
Yes, I see that.
Bodyguard for Obama.
I thought this was a made-up person. It is indeed not.
So anyway, now that we've given Collins his props,
21 minutes.
21 minutes, 0 turnovers. So the team question, is that the best we've seen them play so far?
It's some of those teams they played early on are so bad that it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I would have to say yes that it is, but I still think they upgraded from 4-cylinder to 6-cylinder.
Yeah,
marginally. I mean, I'd say it's marginal over the Minnesota game.
but
Minnesota's horrible.
Maybe the Penn State game.
For most of the Penn State game.
Most of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But the offense wasn't. I mean, they in that Penn State game, they hit 3 3-point.
Right. Well, Penn State didn't double the post. They didn't give Tech any 3-point opportunities, which is smart way to play.
Tech has scored 40 or more paint points 5 straight games.
So there's another one. They outscored UNC in the paint 42-32 because Baycott wasn't there.
Yeah, that's right.
So what do they need to improve on?
I still think they can be a little smoother on the offensive end. It's hard to say because like if Carolina had Baycott, then that would have been a big measuring stick.
Yeah.
But they didn't. So I still don't know how good Tech is. I think they need to improve in late game situations is the biggest thing I can say. They did not play well in late game situations in Charleston in any of those 3 games. They didn't play well down the stretch against Minnesota. Now, some of that is you're up by 20 and you just lose mental focus.
Right.
Carolina, again, they didn't play well down the stretch. So I think that's the next thing. Like Dayton on Wednesday, beat Dayton, and then play well down the stretch. That's the next step, is playing well down the stretch of a basketball game.
I would say improve 3-point shooting. I'm not sure what their season numbers are, but I just feel like Padula's not hitting at the same clip he hit last year. We know Maddox is not.
Well, Maddox, he's not, but
Maddox
at the same time,
he's shooting more.
Well, I don't know that he's actually shooting more. I would argue that he's not shooting enough.
Maddox is 6 of 25.
Right. He's a better shooter than that, but so many.
And he only took 2 yesterday.
Yeah. Right. He's not shooting a lot. That's because the Tech offense for half the year hasn't actually been running. It's been one-on-one with Sean Padula, and that hasn't gotten Maddox enough good looks in rhythm within the flow of the offense. Get back to that, and he'll start shooting at a higher percentage, I think.
I think it's been more than just Padula, though. I mean, it's...
I'm not trying to put it all
no,
on
I was just... But to your point, there have been many times, whether it's maybe not yesterday against North Carolina, but in Charleston, where a guy like Grant Basile is a black hole when the ball goes to him offensively, where the ball doesn't go anywhere else. It goes to Basile and that's it. Or Mutz has had possessions where the ball goes to him and it's... he backs the guy down and goes up under the basket and tries to do a reverse layup and misses. And there have been, it was better yesterday.
Oh, much better. Yeah.
But
Basile had 4 assists, which is tied for team lead, so it was better yesterday.
It was better yesterday, but there were times against Minnesota on Monday where the ball got stuck so many times, where the ball went down to the post and never came back out again. Mm-hmm. And Virginia Tech being able to pass out of the post, whether it is Padula that happens to be down there, or Mutz, or Basile, or whether it's one of Tech's bigs off the bench, that needs to be a point moving forward.
Yeah, so remember, this isn't a general criticism. We're specifically talking about three-point shooting. And David is correct. Like I would argue the ball doesn't come out of the post because those two guys are being guarded one-on-one and they can score. Mm-hmm. But David is correct. If they kick back out, that leads to three-point opportunities that currently aren't happening. But, that said, these are guys who are good shooters and they are missing open threes. So that's to your original question was, what do they need to do better? And maybe I can refine my answer by saying make more of the open 3 points.
And we're not really being critical, but it's from a relative sense. Like when Tech beat Minnesota, they handled Minnesota, and Mike Young gets on the radio after the game and says, "We're not playing good basketball relative to what we're capable of." So Virginia Tech is 8-1 right now, and I don't think they're playing near what they're capable of playing.
And I think that's the most encouraging thing about the season.
I agree 100%.
Is how much better this team can get.
Yep, 100%.
So Virginia Tech now 1-0 in the ACC. That's where you want to be. Sets up a matchup with Dayton on Wednesday. Should be a big confidence boost going into that one, in which Mike Young said it was the worst 5-point loss he had ever had. He also said that they had a lot of returners from that game. So interesting to see how that one works out. Hopefully the tides will change and we get the win.
Dayton not playing all that great this year.
Yeah,
just like they weren't last year.
They've lost 4 games.
Well, they didn't play well early last year, and then they got into a groove later.
Got over though.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is a game Tech should win in Castle. And then you've got Oklahoma State on Sunday.
I wonder if Sean Padula has any friends on that team.
It's a good question.
The Oklahoma guy getting to play someone from back home.
And that's Oklahoma State, I think, right now is oh gosh, let me look. I know this is in one.
I looked at it last night too and noticed that they weren't.
They're 74th in the net.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're a good enough team where they could potentially be top 50. So, and it's the net. It's still early for the net to take it as 100% gospel right now. So, if they can get on a roll and start playing good basketball, then they could potentially be a quad 1 win if Virginia Tech can beat them.
And Big 12 was a really strong conference, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what if I told you that Dayton is a quadrant 4 game right now?
Yeah, Dayton's like, whoa.
Dayton's 163.
Or 163.
And the cutoff is 161.
Right. So Dayton's not a good. They haven't been playing well.
So I earlier I went through and have divided up like I usually do. I did it earlier, but now that the official rankings are out, I went and divided up all of Virginia Tech's current games, or the games they've played, and then the games ahead by quadrant. There are 5 quadrant 1 opportunities remaining. 2 of them are Duke, 2 of them are Virginia, and then Miami on the road. Those are your 5 quadrant 1 opportunities. And Oklahoma State's a quadrant 2 game. A couple games, Wake Forest, NC State, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Miami, depending on whether they're home or away. They're quadrant 2 games. But the rest of them are either quadrant 3 or quadrant 4 games.
Okay.
So it's 5, 6, 6, 5. So it's a kind of even.
Louisville's quadrant 4.
Yeah, well, Louisville's 361 in the net.
Right.
Wow, out of how many teams?
363.
Yep,
Oh,
that
who's
was going to be
worse?
my guess. Right. Maryland Eastern Shore is always worse.
Who's worse? No, Maryland Eastern Shore's not worse.
Wow.
Well, they play a lot of road
Houston
games.
Christian and Hartford.
Houston Christian, I think, they've only been in like Division I for a very short amount of time. So wow, Louisville.
I mean, the fact that Tech played Delaware State in the season opener.
Right.
Delaware State is ahead of Louisville.
Wow. So when does Tech play at Louisville?
The second to last game of the year.
I might go to that game.
At the Yum Center this year. Last year it was huge because we hadn't beaten them in general in
Yes.
so many years. So when's the last time that we won
I might
Yum
go
Center?
to that game just so to watch Virginia Tech beat Louisville on the road.
Well, and to be in the Yum Center. So a couple notes that Nick texted me. Virginia Tech is ranked 107th in the country, shooting 36% from outside. 2 extra percentage points on that if they start making some of their open threes would be nice. And probably pronounced Daron. Daron Holmes, too, is 6'10", plays for Dayton, and is averaging 16 points and 7 rebounds. So 6'10". There you go. Mutz and Basile.
Tech hasn't won at Louisville since 1985.
Oh my God.
3-19 all time.
So I remember that game. Tech beat Louisville by. I was watching that in the lounge of the dorm, and Tech throttled Louisville that day, beat them by like 20, and that was Louisville's biggest loss in Freedom Hall at that point in time.
Do you have cable in the dorms, or was it rabbit ears?
We did not have cable in our rooms, but the lounge had
lounge
cable.
had it, okay.
Yeah.
Transfer portal update. Keyshawn Artis is in the portal.
Okay.
Okay.
He's already got 2 degrees and is getting his 3rd,
Yeah.
and has been a great Hokie, so we wish him the best.
Yep.
Great tackler. Really good run defender.
Yeah.
Same for
some of those. Same for those other older guys that are entering the portal.
Yeah.
Like Caleb Smith, he earned everything he got at Tech. He was a walk-on, earned a scholarship. If he hasn't graduated already, he's about to graduate. Right. Played hurt this past year. Did everything that was always asked of him. Went above and beyond the call of duty, so to speak. So best of luck to him. Same for Chapman, man. Played hurt this year. Wasn't even practicing for part of the year because he was hurt, and then would get out there. And some guys, it's like there's a coaching staff change. I mean, put yourself in like in Armani Chapman's shoes. You're on your second head coach. You're on your third defensive coordinator. You're on your third cornerbacks coach. So you've had so much change thrust upon you that's out of your control during your career. No, you have the opportunity to actually create some change yourself and play your final season on your own terms, or as much on your own terms as you can as a player. Same for Smith.
So if I remember correctly from the introductions they did at halftime, Keyshawn actually has a BIT degree, Business Information Technology, and there's 2 different focuses in that, and I think his is in operational systems or something like that. I don't remember what they call it. I'm up on that because that's Malcolm's degree, know. So congrats to him. Really the true student athlete part of the deal, and to my knowledge has never complained a bit, at least not publicly.
Was Special Teams Player of the Year this year? Yeah.
So last thing before the break, the updated AP poll should be released later today. How good of a shot do the Hokies have to be ranked this week?
Probably not good
there yet.
because
Tech only received 1 point last year.
Yeah, so like they'll get more. They'll get more.
If they beat in College of Charleston, they might be.
Yeah, well, they definitely would be.
Sure.
They'd be unbeaten. Like Carolina is obviously going to drop out.
Yeah.
They're not going to be in the top 25
Out with
at
a
all.
bullet.
Well, yes. They might not even get any votes.
I'm wondering about that. They're Carolina. Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. But yeah, I do think though, depending on how many votes they get this week, then maybe if you win your next 2 and you get up to 10-1, maybe you are, depending on what everybody else does. Now, I want to always remind people that there's 363 teams in Division I college basketball. So being ranked in the top 25, that's in the top, 6-7%?
Something like that.
Something like that. That's a big difference than being ranked in the top 25 in football, where there's like 130 teams.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just a much bigger deal to be ranked in basketball.
It gets you featured in the bottom line scroll is what it does.
Yeah, but like I'm just saying, it's harder to get ranked in basketball because there's more teams.
And it's kind of like making an all ACC team now when there are 14 football teams and 15 basketball teams.
Right.
Not like back in the day when there was an 8-team Big East football conference and The two of them sucked, or maybe three if you throw Pitt in there with Temple and Rutgers. So you're really competing with 5 other teams to make the All Big East team in football 20, 25 years ago. Now, I think it's really remarkable to make an All ACC team in football.
Like
or
a first
basketball.
team, yeah.
I want them to be ranked, but I almost don't because I like the underdog mentality, if you will. They
Well,
still
you
have
know,
a lot to improve upon.
The thing is,
so-
like, we're the ACC champs. Like, we're not even underdogs anymore.
Yeah.
David,
Like,
what was it Mutz said?
When here?
He said something
Mutz
about
has said a lot.
somebody.
I talked to him yesterday.
Somebody asked him last night something about, and he said, "Well, we're Virginia Tech. We're ACC champions. It shouldn't surprise anybody that we're winning."
Oh well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, he and Hunter Couture were both kind of just like, I think, I'm trying to remember the specific quote, but it was something along the lines of, I don't know why, like anybody's surprised. Like we won the ACC.
I mean,
we've earned the right to be here.
Tech was favored.
Yeah, Tech. The line closed at Tech.
If Tech
-1.
lost to Carolina at home yesterday, it would have been an upset.
And the bookies didn't know.
They could have gone out.
Yes.
And, they could have. What's the street in Chapel Hill?
Oh, Franklin.
They could have gone out and partied on Franklin Street if they'd beaten the ACC champs on the road.
Yeah. That's why I was
Get it
so
done.
glad that the students didn't storm the court because
Oh yeah, that would have been.
they had brought out the Rhino people like they were going to, and that would have been
No,
embarrassing.
no.
Yeah, the instant it was over, I actually looked, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Good, they're
Please
staying
don't.
put."
Yes,
Yeah.
please stay. Act like we've been here.
Well, they're all waiting for the team to come around and high five them,
That's
so
true.
that
Yeah.
helps keep them in their seats.
Absolutely. Well, that'll lead us into our break here on episode 275 of the Tech Sideline podcast, presented by First Bank and Trust. Talked about the big win over UNC for the men in the first half, and when we come back, we'll talk the undefeated women's team and also do our final segment of ACC Power Rankings. Make sure you stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back into episode 275 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Talked about the men's team in the first half, and now we shift the page to the women's team. But before that, we'll do our final segment of ACC Power Rankings, which we have kept up with throughout the regular season, as we welcome David Cunningham to the set. We haven't discussed these since November 14th. Is that the last time? So I have a lot to catch up on. The season is complete. The ACC Championship game was played this weekend. We've got bowl matchups revealed, so feel free to comment.
Wasn't much of a game.
Yeah, it wasn't much of a game at all. Exactly. So we can start at the top. Clemson, number one for both of you guys, deservedly so, after their 7th ACC title in 8 years.
8 out of 9.
8 out of 9.
Nick says 8 out of 9.
And all those ACC title games were like blowouts, except for their game
Our
against
game against
Tech.
them.
Exactly. That was a really good game.
You know what's amazing is that if I'm sure I'm not the only person to say this. If Dabo had gone to the backup quarterback earlier in the season, Clemson might be in the playoff.
They might
I
be.
agree. I totally agree. And now DJ's in the portal, so
Yeah.
so many good quarterbacks.
Yeah, so that's DJ Uiagalelei, Brennan Armstrong, Devin Leary, Keydon Slovis.
I wonder if Malik Cunningham will go now that
Phil Dracovics in the portal.
Yeah.
So I mean, so it's Drake May and of course Sam Hartman is, I guess, graduated.
Yeah.
Sam Hartman's
Yeah, I don't
graduating.
think he is.
So Drake May is going to be like the only.
So everybody's.
and he's still a freshman right now.
Yeah.
So people are going to do their way too early. Here's ACC rankings for next year.
North
I'm like,
Carolina.
how could you even do that? Because you don't even know who's going to be playing quarterback for anybody.
Is it Jordan Travis of Florida State?
Yeah.
Travis was pretty good this year.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
So,
He's very good.
if he sticks around, it's funny because we didn't talk about Florida State much. Like, I feel like nobody in the ACC really talked about Florida State much. We got Florida State second on the
we
power
both have
rankings.
them number 2.
And that kind of shows you how like good of a year Florida State had.
They were, they started out great by beating LSU, and at one point I think they lost 3 in a row.
Yeah.
So then you're like, okay, they're back to being old Florida State. But then they stayed the course and got it together and won out. Not that the competition in the ACC is great, but they certainly took major strides forward as a team this year.
Do we know what bowl game Florida State
Cheez-It Bowl against Oklahoma.
What is the Cheez-It Bowl now?
Is it the former Camping World Bowl
Yes.
in Orlando?
But there's 2 Cheez-It sponsorships, unfortunately, now. So there's kind of 2 Cheez-It
There's
Bowls.
2 Cheez-It Bowls?
Yeah.
I just hope they get Cheez-Its.
I don't understand. But yeah, both of you have Florida State second. They snapped a 3-game losing streak to Florida, so that was a really good win for the ACC in those ACC SEC matchups towards the end of the year. I got to think the ACC championship game would have been better if it was Florida State versus Clemson. They did go head-to-head in the regular season, and Clemson won by a small margin. I want to say by like 6 points. But we'll see next year, I guess, is the start of not having divisions, so it'll be interesting. The next one here that y'all have is also interesting. Chris has NC State at 3. David has UNC at 3. NC State won the head-to-head matchup and
With their 4th string quarterback.
Yes.
Which is why I have them ahead.
And they snuck into the college football playoff rankings yesterday at 23.
Right. That's why I have them
So,
ahead. All right. So,
David, explain yourself.
Yeah, David, you've got them all the way at A.
Yeah, that's where I had, because I had NC State at 9 in our last rankings.
See, I didn't pay attention to my last rankings when I did my rankings this time.
Yeah.
I mean, they barely.
Yeah.
Who did NC State beat before Carolina?
I thought they had lost to Boston College the week before, but there might have been one game.
They had lost to Louisville the week before with their 4th string quarterback.
Okay,
All right, so my point, the reason I've got them ranked 3rd is because number 1 they were the Atlantic, which is a stronger division. And then they beat UNC head to head.
Yeah.
So with their 4th string quarterback, imagine if they'd had Devin Leary, they would have killed UNC.
Yeah.
So and based on all that, I've got them 3rd. They did lose head to head against Louisville, but like Louisville 7-5. I don't know. It's a tough call, but I could not rank UNC ahead of NC State based on the fact that UNC's lost 3 in a row, and one of those losses was to NC State, and just one game in the record separates them.
So you've got Carolina at 4, Chris. David, you have Duke at 4, who pretty good win against Wake Forest to end their regular season debut, playing UCF in the Military Bowl. I kind of would have thought Duke would have a better bowl game than the Military Bowl coming off an 8-4 season, but
so it's really hard to rank the middle of the conference.
Yeah.
So your Louisvilles,
they're
your
1 and
Pitts
2
your
off
Dukes.
from each other.
Okay, so now here's the reason I ranked my teams. I had Louisville 5th, Pitt 6th, Duke 7th. All right, so Louisville only went 7-5. Those other teams went 8-4, but they did play in the harder division. And in the last month of the season, Louisville beat Pitt head-to-head, and then Pitt beat Duke head-to-head. So that's why I ranked it 5, 6, and 7 like I did. And then obviously with Wake Forest being 8th, Duke beat them head-to-head. So that's why my rankings from 5 to 8 are the way they are.
How about you, David? Care to explain?
Yeah, I have Pitt 5th, Wake 6th, and Louisville 7th, and NC State at 8th.
Pitt dismantled Miami in their final regular
I
season
gave them
game.
a lot of bonus points for absolutely killing Miami, which probably shouldn't have because Miami's not good.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. I kind of went off of my last rankings a little bit. I mean, Wake had a close loss to Duke to the end of the year, and Louisville and Pitt. Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, Pitt and Louisville, all that like conglomerate of like 5 teams, like 4 through 8, all kind of like ended the year on high notes. Mostly, I guess like the one team that didn't was Duke, but like they lost by 4 to Wake Forest. So
No, Duke beat Wake
Or
Forest.
Duke beat
Wake
Wake
Forest.
Forest.
So Duke, who lost to
Wake
Duke by
struggled
4.
down the stretch, lost
Yeah.
like 4 out of 5 or something, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course just the mix up of Boston College, UVA, and Virginia Tech. At the end, Virginia Tech and UVA didn't play their final game, so couldn't really bump or move them in that scenario. One more question though: what are your thoughts on Georgia Tech keeping Brent Keys? I thought that they were going to hire Tulane's coach, and then that idea seemed kind of mixed.
I think it's the Dabo deal, right? Like Dabo got half the season in 2000. Was it
6 or 7?
Yeah, something like that. 2007, I think it was. And or maybe it was 2000, whatever year it was. And I think Key is like it's sort of the same thing. He got a dress rehearsal, and I think did a good job with what he had. I mean, at one point he was down to a third string true freshman quarterback,
dude,
and they won games.
And they beat Carolina with that,
They
so.
lost to Georgia by what, like 14?
They were winning 7-0 on one.
It was a fairly competitive game,
and they win that game, and they're going to a bowl game.
I think he got the most out of his talent that you definitely could, especially when you take over in the middle of the season like that.
He's a Georgia Tech alum. He's a great culture fit. That video of them, I don't know if any of you guys saw the video of them introducing him, and the players just went nuts.
Yeah.
Really? Oh, so that's good if they're
So
happy
like
with it.
I think the biggest thing is he's got to put the right people around him.
Yeah.
But I think Georgia Tech's gonna be competitive.
Yeah, I think obviously when Jeff Collins first got fired, I would have been like, okay, I don't know who's going to coach. But then they started winning games and playing competent football under the guy they've already got. So after like a month or so, I think that after they won, I think I wrote before they played Virginia Tech, it was like, look, he's already won 2 games. If he wins a third, they're going to keep him. So ever since they beat Virginia Tech,
4 or 5, and he beat Tech and North Carolina.
Right. So I've always thought they were going to. So God, that's how sorry Carolina is. Is like they lost to Georgia Tech's 3rd string quarterback, and then they lost to NC State's 4th string quarterback.
So they started 9-1, and they're 9-4.
That tells you. And Mac Brown got a Coach of the Year vote. 1. Dave Doran got none. Dave Doran went 8-4 with 4 different starting quarterbacks. Yeah. Mac Brown went 9-4 and lost to 3rd string quarterbacks and 4th string quarterbacks and backup quarterbacks in the ACC championship game. Yet he got a first place vote.
He mentioned they did not prepare for Cade Klubnik at all because, quote unquote, Clemson has not changed up their quarterback all year. Cade Klubnik has had decent snaps.
I mean, cry me a river. Maybe you should score more than 10 points.
Yeah, weird.
Deservedly so, Mike Elko, Coach of the Year.
Absolutely.
I know. I mean, the fact that Duke was winless in the ACC last year, and then, like, we're talking about Duke as, in the top half of the ACC.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I could have gone
impressive turnaround.
For me, I could have gone with either Elko, Dave Doran, or Mike Norvell as ACC Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
But Doran didn't even get a vote.
Yeah. So Duke is competitive in football now. I would say Mike Elko's next task is getting fans to attend their games.
Well, that's an impossible
Good
task.
luck.
Yeah. They can't even auction off thousands of dollars in the fourth quarter for people to stay, I guess.
Wow.
But one more thing on Brent Keys. It'll now be Brent Keys versus Brent Pry in the Tech Bowl every single year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess there's
Brent-
no coastal
Brent-
division
one
anymore.
syllable
So
last.
do we play Georgia Tech next
No,
year?
it's Key without an S. Are you pronouncing
Brent.
it with an S?
Brent
Key.
Key.
And
or
Brent Key.
Brent Key.
Brent Key versus
Pry.
Brent Pry.
Okay.
Yeah, the Brent with the one syllable last name.
I said that thinking we were still playing Georgia Tech every year, but there's no divisions.
Yeah,
so.
that's right. I'm not
Yes.
sure. I just wrote an article
TBD.
last
Yeah, I was
last
gonna
week.
say, do you want to go over now? Since we're talking about football, do we want to go over who Tech has next year?
I feel like we could probably do a whole episode on that.
Yeah,
Just
we
once
can.
the schedule gets
I was
released
gonna
in
say
January.
go over it briefly because Tech
Sure.
only plays 2 teams from the coastal next year,
Oh, really?
and that's Pitt
UVA.
and Virginia. Everybody else is the Atlantic. They play every Atlantic team except for Clemson.
Right.
Yeah. So the finalized schedule should be released late January. I want to say football wise for 2023.
Right now, we know who we're playing. We just don't know when.
When.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
know the dates of our non-conference games.
Correct.
So the
Yes.
first 4 games of the
Your
season are going to
Marshalls,
be
your
Old
Rutgers.
Dominion, Purdue at home, Rutgers, and Marshall away.
yeah. We get to
Disgusting
we
schedule.
get to play the Big Ten West champs,
Yep.
who actually gave Michigan a fairly competitive game. The other
they
night.
did?
Yeah, they're a very well coached team. So basically, we traded Wofford for the Big Ten West champs on our schedule.
Traded West
We have
Virginia for
on
Rutgers.
paper, we have a much more difficult schedule next year.
Yeah.
We'll see about conference play, but our non-conference schedule is certainly more difficult. Like I said, we don't play an FCS. There's no guaranteed win on the schedule next year.
Yeah.
I would say Old Dominion at home. But
I
Apparently
would
it's
say
not
that too,
guaranteed
David.
anymore.
Yeah.
Well, they do beat ODU at home. It's just on the road that they struggle.
Well, don't give them too many
But
opportunities.
that again, that's only one win. I mean, that's one game.
I would right. That's that's
Tech
not
plays,
even guaranteed.
Tech play. So if we look at our power rankings, Tech plays NC State, Pitt, Syracuse, and Wake Forest at home. All those teams we ranked in the top 10 in our power rankings.
I would say Syracuse. Sorry, Gio. Syracuse stunk down the stretch.
Oh, yes.
They overplayed what they were capable of doing for the first half of the season, and then football corrected itself down the stretch. I would say. Now Schrader was banged up too, and that had part of it. But Schrader's gone, right?
I think he's got another year.
No, does he have another year?
I think
I don't know.
so. So it'll be interesting to see with the UVA connection if Brennan Armstrong considers Syracuse.
I doubt he will.
But
Sounds like people think he's going to Notre Dame.
but then away in the ACC, Tech has Florida State, who we both have second,
Yeah, I'm terrified for that.
and Louisville, who we both have in the top 7, and then Boston College and Virginia. So
Schrader's got another year.
Does he have another?
He's listed as a junior on their website.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's going to be an interesting 2023.
Interesting makeup. Well, that's going to wrap up our final edition of ACC Power Rankings. We'll potentially start that for basketball coming up as ACC play gets underway. But now we'll go ahead and bring Carter to the set, and Chris will exit the set, and we'll talk some women's basketball.
Nice.
Brief 20-second intermission.
Man, we got a deep bench.
Sorry.
Lots of range today, especially because Carter was in Knoxville for the game, so that's part of the reason why we wanted to have him on set. Before we talk about yesterday's game, we have yet to acknowledge the first ever triple-double in Virginia Tech women's basketball history. Georgia Amore, 24 points, 11 assists, 10 rebounds, and a dominant win over Nebraska. What a performance from her that day.
She was, what's crazy to think about is Tech's only had 3 double-doubles. Virginia Tech basketball, men and women, have only had 3 triple-doubles ever, and 2 of them occurred in 2022.
With current players who are here, yeah.
Justin Mutz had his in February against January or February against Syracuse, and then Georgia Amore had hers this past week against Nebraska. It's interesting because Chris Clark had the first ever one in 2016 against the Citadel, and ever since the competition has increased, and it was Syracuse and then Nebraska, and the fact that Amore had never had a double-double before,
Really?
and then she goes out and has a triple-double.
Yeah.
To see her get that 10th rebound too, where the whole crowd was chanting one more rebound, that was really,
So
really
everyone
cool to
knew
see.
that
Everybody
she was on
knew.
the cusp of it.
Kenny Brooks talked about it after the game. He was like, our girls knew because the crowd let them know.
Right.
You know, when you're chanting one more rebound, it's hard to focus up, and Tech was up by 30 points or something like that at that point. So she soared up, grabbed that rebound with like a minute and a half left, and place went berserk.
Do you guys think that many people watch live stats during a game?
No, you know what's interesting, and I'm not going to take credit for this, but I think my sister, who of course she's the vice president of Castle Guard, my sister said something about one of the kids was following along your Twitter, and so I either some kids, I mean, I think to that point, I think it was kind of obvious to see where Georgia, like where Amor was in her stats, and she was like sitting at like 12, like 8-8 for a really long time. Like it was obvious she was going to be really, really close. So I think for a while it was kind of obvious. I mean, the team knew. I think Kenny told Amor with like a couple minutes to go, like, hey, you only need like one more rebound. So
the camera panned her and she was saying, I'm trying. So I don't know if Kenny was like, you need one more rebound, but that was cool to see.
I think it was out of one of the last timeouts.
Yeah, it was one of the last timeouts, yeah.
For those of you that I watched it on television, you guys were there. The announcers on the ACC network were remote. So it was kind of awkward where you could hear on television the crowd chanting one more rebound. And the color analyst said, oh, the crowd needs to get into it and start calling for another rebound. And I'm like,
bad luck.
So your headphones aren't working very well, huh?
Well, shifting to yesterday's game, Virginia Tech avenges their 2021 loss to the Volunteers and wins this one 59-56. Carter, you were at the game in Knoxville. Chris Hirons was there covering it for Tech Sideline. Just talk about the atmosphere and what you saw from Kenny Brooks' team yesterday.
I thought the atmosphere was really cool. They played in front of just over 8,500 people. I don't know the last time that Tech women's basketball has played in front of that amount of people, but that's a cool arena. Thompson Bowling holds about 18K, really large, really steep. You think Castle Coliseum is steep? That place is steep as well. A chunk of the upper deck was full, not on the corners, but it was loud in there for the back half of the game. Tech led from start to finish, but it was one of those games where it's like they're up by 2, then they're up by 4, then they're up by 6, back down to 3. So Tennessee was always within striking distance. I mean, they had 2 shots to tie the game within the last 10 seconds. Yep. Jordan Hurston, who was their leading scorer with 26 points, that was her season high. She had a shot from the baseline that would have tied the game. Really good look with about 8 seconds left. And then she threw up a prayer from just in front of half court with about a second left at the buzzer that would have tied the game as well. And it got loud in there for the back 10 seconds, but I thought Kenny Brooks' team responded really, really well. They didn't have Ashley Wusu. Doesn't seem like they're going to have her for quite some time. Kenny Brooks told Chris Hirons after the game, you mentioned he covered it for TSL, that it was probably going to be an indefinite thing where she's not going to be with the Hokies for quite some time, but we'll see. I think they're going to find out a little bit more today. Of course, she's the All-American transfer from Maryland and was really supposed to contribute this year, but the Hokies did a really, really solid job filling in her absence. Kayana Traylor, who missed Thursday's win over Nebraska with a non-COVID-like illness, she put up 18 points. And she really facilitated the offense really, really well in place of Georgia Amor too, because Amor got in foul trouble early in the game. I think she picked up 2 fouls in the first quarter. So she really ran the point really well throughout the whole game. And then Deasia Gregg off the bench, she stepped up big against Nebraska and she put up 10 points yesterday in just 20 minutes and knocked down 2 big free throws. Liz Kitley didn't have her best game, only 6 points. She knocked down a big basket in the paint with under a minute left. So Hokies a little bit sloppy, didn't knock down a 3 in the fourth quarter, but you get the win. Anytime you can win in Knoxville, you take it for sure.
Absolutely. Thoughts from you, David?
Yeah, I thought it was tough. There was a 15-minute clock delay.
Yes.
That was like in the second half, and I think that kind of, I don't know, I don't think we got any direct quote on it, but I think it kind of changed the game a little bit. I mean, the player, like everybody was just sitting around for 15 minutes while they literally changed clocks. Like the shot clock wasn't working, so they went and got another shot clock and put a new shot clock in. I thought Tech played well. I mean, he played well enough to win. Could have played better. Elizabeth Kitley, it's 2 straight times where she's kind of struggled against Tamari Key last year, this year. She made enough plays to win. It's going to be really interesting once we get into ACC play, which is right around the corner, to see how Kitley kind of matches up against some of the best bigs in the ACC. she and Elisa Cunane of NC State, who's no longer there, they had some really good matchups over the years. But against other bigs, Kitley hasn't been as productive. So I'm kind of curious to see where she aligns there. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things was Tech didn't score the ball as well as it has a lot of games this year. But the defense has been there every single game. A Tech opponent has not averaged more than 1 point per possession this year, which is really good. It kind of explains just how good Tech's defense is. Unfortunately, there aren't, at least not that I'm aware of, any like efficiency ratings like there are for the men's side as there are for the women. But Tech's defense has kind of anchored the program. Whether it's playing Nebraska and you're up 30. Tech's defense was good against Nebraska on Thursday night. Tech's defense was good yesterday when it needed. The Hokies weren't, again, scoring the ball like extremely well. But the fact that they're playing a pretty good Tennessee team that has a lot of talent and can score, and they didn't, Tennessee had some runs but never quite got into the game enough where they had the entire crowd behind them and the momentum was completely swung. I think that kind of goes to show you just kind of where Tech basketball is, at this point.
Start of the game, Kiana Traylor, like you said, 18 points. Who really stepped up in the absence of Ashley Owusu. It's nice to have depth like that where it can really be anyone's game any day.
Yeah, I think Traylor is somebody who Kenny Brooks has said over and over that she's when she came to Virginia Tech, she just wanted to play basketball. She didn't care how much. She didn't care, whether she started or not. She just wanted to play with Georgia Amore and Elizabeth Kitley and Kayla King, and she's done that. And it's not the first time. I mean, Traylor had a big game last year against North Carolina and NC State in the ACC tournament, which is the last time Tech played in front of a big crowd like that. Mm-hmm. And when Tech was missing some players down the stretch, missing King, missing Kitley in the ACC tournament, she came up big. She's somebody who scored 30-plus points a couple times at Purdue. She can put up big numbers, but she's coming off the bench most of the time. But, yeah, I'm very curious to see what Owusu's injury deal is. I don't know how long she's going to be out for. Tech has a couple ACC games coming up, so we'll find out more here shortly. But, yeah, I think, the ability to have somebody like Kiana Traylor come off the bench even when Georgia Amore's struggling. Georgia Amore had a triple-double and then does not have her best game on Sunday. But the fact that there's somebody who kind of picks up the slack in that situation, that's important. I'm not sure that the men's team has that same, ability to do that. We talked a little bit about MJ Collins. MJ Collins has been good, but he's a true freshman. And they don't have somebody who, has a ton of minutes and a ton of points and a ton of rebounds and all these numbers under their belt like Tech does with Kiana Traylor, or, you go down the list where, Taylor Soule, she played well, but Tech kind of has this long list on the women's side of all of these players who've, have been in those situations before.
Yeah, Amore just was 2 for 12 from 3 yesterday. So even in the limited time she played, she wasn't herself, like you touched on. But yeah, Kiana Traylor off the bench too, or she started yesterday, but you touched on it a little bit. She's coming off the bench in, if Virginia Tech is full strength, she's going to be coming off the bench. She averaged double figures last year. She was their 6th woman off the bench, and she's going to be averaging double figures again this year. And it really speaks to the depth that Kenny Brooks' team has put together. And I think that's what's going to make him so dangerous in a run down the stretch. And if Ashley Owusu can come back and be a major contributor to this team, Traylor's back relegated to the bench, and she's not going to complain about it. And she's going to play a huge role in Virginia Tech's potential Elite 8, Final 4 hopes down the stretch this year in 2022-23.
Will, I know you had something.
Right. So I found this interesting. I know you guys probably know this, but Virginia Tech has actually won 3 out of the last 4 games against Tennessee, including 2-0 in Knoxville.
Okay.
So you go back to 2015, Tech beat 8th-ranked Tennessee 57-43 in Knoxville. And then in 2016, they beat 17th-ranked Tennessee 67-63 in Blacksburg. Tech is unranked for both those games. And then last year, Tennessee was ranked 11th, Tech was unranked, and Tennessee won that one in Blacksburg 64-58. And then finally the rankings flipped. Tech is ranked 9th this year, Tennessee's not ranked, and the Hokies won in Knoxville. So Tech was over against Tennessee until those last 4 games.
Mm-hmm. Granted, it was only 2 games, but Tech actually hasn't lost in Knoxville since 1994 for women's basketball.
Yeah. So now they rack in their 3rd SEC win, all of those away. I guess you can't really say that the Bahamas.
Well, yeah, 2 on a neutral floor and 1 away. But, and I mean, of course, next, starting in 2023-4, we're going to have the ACC SEC Challenge. So,
yes.
I know it's funny. Mike Young and Kenny Brooks were both like, I enjoy playing the Big Ten. I like Big Ten basketball, but the fact that Tech fans, Tech media, Carter and Chris, the fact that the SEC's much closer, that's kind of nice. They're more regional rivalries, I think. But what Tech's shown, the women have shown that they can handle the SEC teams, even the ones that are historically, really, really dominant.
A matchup with Vanderbilt would just be perfect for the Tech sideline brand to have Jake Lyman calling a game against the Hokies. So hopefully,
Evan Hughes versus Jake Lyman.
Yeah,
who are you listening
to?
That's cool.
That would be one for the ages. There was one of the more questionable calls I'd seen right at the end where Georgia Amore had possession with 10 seconds left. She was called for a jump ball. What was your take when that call was?
Well, so we're calling the game for 33-04, so we got to stay neutral. I didn't think it was a good call. So they called. So essentially, for anybody who missed the game, I believe there's 7.7 seconds remaining, and Tech was up by 2. And Tennessee had just hit 2 free throws. They were fouled on the other end, and they inbounded the ball to Georgia Amore, and she had the ball far side of the floor, and 2 girls just hounded her. And they put her arms around her, and they're trying to force that jump ball, but they were essentially mauling her.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if they had possession of the ball to the point where you could call a jump ball, but for whatever reason, the official sided with the jump ball call. The possession arrow went to Tennessee. I remember Georgia couldn't believe it. She was jumping up and down, hands up in her air, and she doesn't. David would know. She doesn't typically react to stuff like that.
No,
and,
I thought it was just. I thought. I could have understood if they had given it like a second or 2 more and it had continued to play out like that. But it didn't seem like Tennessee seemed like they had like a hand on the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like it wasn't like any possession or anything. It's not like they're 2 or 3 players grabbing at it. It's Amore has it and they're just touching the ball, and it's like that's not. I don't know. I didn't really think it was a jump ball. And at that point, that was like in the. The Tech men's game had just started, so I was like I'm like, what? I didn't have my eye. I had been listening to the women's game, and I didn't have the audio on at that point. So I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on, and I'm like, that doesn't, to me, like with no audio, nothing, it didn't look like a jump ball.
Yeah. He described it well. Just 1 hand on the ball. They call it jump ball. Possession arrow goes to Tennessee. And that was their opportunity to tie the game up, and that's the one that Jordan Horston missed it from the baseline. Tech got the rebound. Tennessee ended up getting 1 more shot, but essentially that was a big swing because Amore would go to the line if she sinks both free throws. Tennessee didn't have any timeouts left at that point, so they couldn't advance the ball. So the game's probably over. But Tech ended up winning anyway, so it's not a huge controversy at this point.
The women's game ran kind of late. Like you said, I was working the men's game, and we kind of started a big watch party in the tunnel for the women's game while the men's game was going on. And so I was watching it with a bunch of people. With Babcock and Kelly Babcock were there, and everyone was mad about that call and just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
So glad it didn't affect the game, though. Glad they still secured the win. Both games, against Tennessee for the women and UNC for the men, were 2 games that were very hyped up preseason. We were all looking to this December 4th date, and both of those teams have kind of had their respective struggles earlier in the season, but of course you'll take any day where you beat UNC in men's basketball and Tennessee in women's basketball. So a good day all in all. Another big day for both basketball teams Wednesday, with the men looking to avenge their loss to date. And like we said, women tipping off ACC play against Boston College. There's a couple connections between these 2 programs,
Just
I believe.
a little bit.
Yeah. Detail what they are.
Taylor Soule
Yes.
and Clara Ford both played for Boston College last year. So, yeah, it's
exciting homecoming for them.
That's going to be interesting. Yeah, they both get to go back up to Boston. One quick note on the men's and women's teams. Tennessee and North Carolina, Tennessee's women's program and North Carolina men's program, they have 13 or 14 national championships combined and like 39 Final Fours. And the fact that Virginia Tech men's and women's basketball led for over 75 minutes between the two games. Like 75 minutes and 28 seconds between the two games. That's insanely impressive. If you told somebody that 10 years ago, well, if I told you in 10 years ago that in 2022, Virginia Tech men's and women's basketball would beat Tennessee women on the road and North Carolina men at home and lead for 75 of the 80 minutes, what would you have said?
I would totally believe the men could do that because I'd seen it. I'd seen them do it against some really good UNC teams. And
like you guys mentioned, the 2007 win earlier. Yeah,
I would not have believed the Tennessee part of it.
Yeah, and they did both.
Yeah.
And I think that just kind of speaks to where Virginia Tech basketball is at this point.
Yeah.
A lot to look forward to. This would usually be the time where we take some fourth tier questions, but I don't know the status of that.
I got nothing.
Okay. The fourth tier was
going through Twitter and stuff like that. Nobody's asked. I asked for questions on Twitter and nobody asked any. So
okay. Well, good. We fit it all in into a good span of time. Anything coming up on Tech Sideline this week? I know Chris isn't here. I usually ask.
Yeah. So Chris was talking about how he's going to set up a page to try to track all the ins and outs.
Yep.
Good luck with that. That could be a little challenging. I don't know what else we have going on editorially. I am gonna actually write an article today about the Hokie Way. We've talked about it on the podcast and message boards and things like that. So I'll put a piece up on the site about the Hokie Way, and I will also put a short article up saying that this is near and dear to all of your hearts. We have fully endowed the Tech Sideline Scholarship in the Virginia Tech School of Communications. If you haven't heard anything about it, the deal with that was that we started it in 2018, and for 5 years we were paying $1,667 a month, which totals up to $100,000 over 5 years. We needed a tax break, so paid it off early, paid the final $13,000 the other day. So the Tech Sideline, what is it called? It's called the Tech Sideline Scholarship for Sports Journalism or something like that, and we have put our full 100,000 in. So
that's awesome news.
You guys will not benefit from it. Well, Carter might. He's young. Nick's young. Gio's young.
I checked the YouTube comments and I have one question for Will.
Okay.
It's a Hokie Way question. Scott Rhodes question: if you were donating $1,000 annually, is that more impactful to the athletic department directly or to the Hokie Way? I'll
say it this way. Because I saw that and I thought about it. And I'm like, I don't know about that. The one need that the athletic department has is to fund scholarships, and that bill is about $17 million a year. That's the big one. That was it. So when Witt took over, they brought emphasis to that. The athletic department, the Hokie Club, before Witt became athletic director, the Hokie Club didn't really talk about what scholarships cost, and didn't really talk about how Hokie Club donations went towards that. And then their strategy became, I don't want to use the phrase break it out, but they started making fans aware of, in order for us just to pay the scholarship portion of the bill out of donations, this much needs to be donated every year. And there were actually a couple of years where they were upside down, and Hokie Club donations were not enough to cover the cost of scholarships. So that was coming out of the operational fund. So I think moving forward, the big need that the athletic department has on an annual basis is enough money to fund scholarships, which is currently about $17 million a year. Other than that, speaking strictly from a what will be most advantageous to the program, we're starting to have these discussions, and the people around Virginia Tech are starting to have these discussions where college athletics is becoming more and more like the pro model, where and I think we've discussed this on the podcast, that a lot of college facilities are better than NFL facilities because you don't recruit NFL players. You pick them and sign them, and it's all about the money that goes to the player, not the facilities. And in college, in the past, it's been dump money into facilities, and the players didn't get anything. Well, now it's in the process of switching. So I think you can have a bigger impact on the program and man, this is probably making Whit Babcock's hair get grayer to hear this. If you want to make a big impact on the program, I would donate to NIL, specifically the Hokie way, since it's tax advantaged. Because what it boils down to for me is if you can go to, again, and I've seen South Carolina's indoor facility, it's awesome. If you can go to South Carolina as a football player and get a $25,000 NIL deal, or you can go to Virginia Tech, whose facilities aren't as good, and get a $50,000 NIL deal, what do you think the kid's going to do? He's going to go to Virginia Tech. There's other factors that enter into it, like playing time and stuff like that. So donations have always been advantageous to the programs, but in my mind, it's a much more direct line. If you're funding NIL and the coaches are not allowed to use that to draw players here, but word gets out. So that's my long-winded answer. It's we're putting $2,000 into the Hokie way this month. Tech Sideline contributes to the Hokie Club, but not that much. Kind of tells you how I feel. Don't listen to what I say. Watch what I do.
Yeah.
Well, it was another great episode of the Tech Sideline podcast. I want to thank you for tuning in and thank everybody on set today. Will Stewart, founder and general manager of Tech Sideline. He's at Will Stewart TSL on Twitter. Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline, who was on in the first half. He's at Chris Coleman TSL on Twitter. David Cunningham, he's at The Real D Cunna. Carter Hill, he's at CBHill_03. Nick Brown producing. Thank you, Nick. And I'm Katie Adams signing off on episode 275 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Enjoy your week, Hokies fans, and we'll see you next time.